Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers, and welcome to the Payment Reminders with Penalties. In this week's training, I'm going to show you how to create a fully automated payment reminder system in Excel that includes unlimited reminders, automated email reminders, automated and customizable penalties, dynamic variables with personalized emails, and best of all, we're going to do it all from scratch. Every function, every format, formula, right in front of your eyes. I cannot wait, so let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me. I've got a fantastic and unique training this week, Payment Reminders with Penalties, a fully automated system to remind your customers of payments that are overdue. And if that's not enough, I have packed this into an incredible application that we already created in the past few weeks. Although this is a brand new training and you will not have to know or have seen any other trainings before this. However, it is important to know that there's already in this application, in which you can download for free, a complete invoice application, fully customizable invoice, along with a reminder. We have complete payments here, Invoice and Payments Manager. That was last week. So those trainings were completed. This one's going to be on payment reminders. We're going to be able to automate this payment, and we're going to do it from scratch. So this is a sample. I'll be closing this and opening up a new one after I show you the details of this. So we're going to be able to create this. Now you're going to be able to take an invoicing application along with payments, and we're going to wrap this in an automated reminder so that your customers get an automatic email. So when we click check and send, it'll let you know if there's any reminders. And of course, that means that there's no reminders going to be sent out. However, if we delete something from the log here, and that means that payment can go out. So we're going to check and send, and an email gets automatically created. Now that email is fully customizable. It lets them know that there's an overdue notice for what invoice. It lets them know specific customer name, that there was an invoice number 6 for $974, how much the penalty has been assessed, and the total that they now owe, how many days overdue that invoice. So that's fully customizable, fully dynamic emails. We'll be able to create unlimited emails, and we'll be able to create unlimited reminders. Now, this is all customized inside the admin screen. So we're going to have this brand new penalties. Now, keep in mind the other information in the admin screen was from previous trainings, but if you catch those, I'll leave the links down below. One's for the invoice, one's for the payments, but we're focused on penalty fees assessed on overdue. So certainly this is not a part 2. This is not a continuation. This is a brand new training. So you won't have to have seen those before. So what we can do is we can create additional penalties. We can create as many penalties as we want. Now, I've got here a list, just about a table that we've set, about 10 or so. And of course, these are the types of penalties that can create it. For example, we want to let the customer know for anything 5 days overdue, but there's no penalty on that. Maybe something that's 30 days, we do want to assess a penalty, and that penalty is going to be based on the percentage of the balance. It can also be assessed as a fixed amount. So we have a fixed amount here for $20.50 on this one. However, the percentage of balance. So we get to create a fully customizable penalty type based on a percentage or a fixed amount, along with the number of days overdue. And then when we create a brand new payment reminder, add new, we can then set a name here, and then we can set the penalty type here. So this is what we're going to be creating. We'll create an email subject and an email message, and those include these variables here. And we can let them know that we want to send this, we want to create this reminder, let's say within 30 days after the due date for balances greater than whatever you want to set, maybe anything over greater than 0 balances. So we can create that and save that automatically. So this is what we're going to be creating. This is how that works. We'll be able to save them, add new, delete, and of course check and send for reminders. That's what we're going to be building. This is the sample. I'll be closing this right now, and we are going to be saving it from a blank worksheet. Now keep in mind this workbook itself has that payment reminders, that screen you just saw, which we're going to be building from scratch. However, this particular workbook does contain the admin, and it does contain the invoice, so keep that in mind. It does contain all that, so we don't need to necessarily recreate the entire workbook. We're going to focus on this fully customizable payment reminders. Okay, so in this particular sheet, as with many, we're going to dedicate the first 2 columns, columns A and B, to admin. We'll be using just a few cells of those, but not too much, so we're going to call that gray. We want the first row, we're going to give that call, we're going to give that the title, Payment Reminders with penalties. And we'll also give it a little bit of a format here, all the way to, let's say, N or O, something large. And we want to format that nicely with some blue colors, just as you saw in the sample. So we're going to fill that. And I'm going to give it some fill effects. We're going to use this blue color. Many of you like to see these. Now, this is a relatively simple application. There's not a lot of macros. Therefore, we can create this from scratch. However, keep in mind that larger applications with a lot of them will still be, that's probably a little bit big for this screen, 22, we will have to create those, and then I'll go over the code. So it really depends on the type of training. Of course, this training is for you. So if you want me to create types of training, you want to see more from scratch, or you want to see bigger applications in which I go over the code, let me know in the comments below. This training is for you. So I always appreciate your feedback, and it is your feedback. So don't forget to go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If you will, please click the like button, that helps. And don't forget to click the notification icon bell. That is going to help us and help the algorithm so that you get alerted to when I have brand new trainings. All right, all I did was cover the background while I'm talking away here. I'm just gonna give it a nice color. That's gonna give it a nice format though. So that's kind of the basis of it. I'm gonna probably save row 2. That's gonna be for our button set. So our button set's gonna go right here. And I want a list of reminders here. So inside, let's say right here, I'll drop it down to 4, B4. Let's go ahead and D4. I think D4 is, we'll put reminders in here. And then our first one will be in, let's say, row 5. We'll drop it down to reminders. And then 5 will be our first row of reminders. And I've got this zoomed in a little bit. So I want to all italicize and bold that. And I'm going to center that. Also, what I want to do is I want to have the reminder name here. So I guess 2 and 3 is fine here. We'll use reminder name here. We've got the reminder name. We'll put the name. I want the first field called the reminder name. And then I'm going to skip down. I'm going to go to row 6. We're going to call create reminder. I want to know how frequent, how often should we create it, as you saw in the sample. Below that, I want to know what penalty type. So that is going to be a field. We need to assess that because there's different penalty types. Next up in row 10, we'll do the email subject. That'll be a full row. And then down below, we will do a large field for the email message, customized message that we want to send. Okay, so for the reminder name, now next up, I also want to have a status. So we'll put in column J here, we'll put the status here. So that means only those that are active, status. And it'll be something like active or inactive or something like that. Okay, next up, I want to do in this particular row, I want to put days after. So here we'll have a long merge cell here, create a reminder, let's see, number of days after. So I'm going to merge and center this. And we're going to put days after due date for balances greater than, and then the user will put an amount in here. So let's say $30 or whatever. And then I want the penalty type. Let's say we'll put a drop down list of all the penalty types. Those are the same penalty types that you saw in here. We're going to be putting a drop down list. I've got a named range for that. If we go into the formulas, name manager, and we look down here and we have something called here under penalties. This is an offset named range. Let's move that over and zoom it in. You see admin using offset. If I tab into that, it's going to surround those. So penalties is the one that we want to add as a data validation for that field because we want the user to choose from one of those penalties. So when I click in here, I'm going to click in data and then data validation. We can also use F3 on the list to select it, or we can just do equals, and then I've already copied that. So penalties. So that's going to be our penalty. So we have a drop down list of penalties. The email subject is going to be the full row. We'll go all the way to K on that one. I'm going to merge and center that and left justify that. Email message, we can use a larger field, and perhaps we can go all the way down to, let's say, 33 on something like that. So we want it to be large, so that's going to cover that, or just, let's see, yeah, probably 33. So I'll extend this down a little bit, and we'll go to a large row so that we get everything covered. And that way it allows the user to put in larger emails. So 33 all the way to from column K, 33, and then all the way up to this one. I'm going to merge and center that. I'm going to left justify it, and then I'm going to use the upper. And then what we're going to do is we're going to give it a white. So that's going to be our email message. Also going to give this white. Okay, so for our fields, the penalty type. And then what we want to put is how many days overdue. And then what I'll do is I'll put the amount. So I'll do something like, and I'll have VBA take care of this, 90 days overdue at, and then what is the amount, right? So the amount will be something like $30 or, and then this will be either dollars or percent. So this will be taken by VBA. So VBA, so as we change this, 5 days or 15 days, this will change and this will change. So what are we going to base that information on? It's going to be based on here. So if it's 5 days overdue, that means 30 days overdue. It's a percentage of the balance, and obviously 0 in this case, but we could change it. Or for a fixed amount, we could change that to $10 or whatever. So this is the information when I select 15 days that I want to apply here. So how many days overdue, and whether it's 30 or whether it's a percent. So in this field, VBA will say dollars or percentage based on what I choose here, the email subject. So this case, we will just put, this is the only one that the user is going to be entered in this one. Everything else is going to be automated. So what I'll do is I'll hold down the control, and just for those fields that I want the user to be entering, I'm going to color those. And this one, the number of days here. So which is actually this one here. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. I'm going to give those color white, and I'm going to format those. I'll continue to hold down the control for this, and what I'll do is I'll drop it down here, and we'll just right click on those fields, and what we're going to do is we're going to go to format cells. Once we format those cells, I'll give it a border, and we'll use a darker color within our theme, this one, and I'll go all the way around with the solid, and then on the left side I'll give it the dotted line here. Okay, and then something very, very similar on the labels. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the control here on all the labels here. And then what I want to do is I want to right justify it. So I'm going to right justify it here by just holding that down right here. And then also I need to actually merge and center these. I want to make these a little bit bigger, and this one too. It should also encompass this. So let's shrink it down a little bit so we can see everything. And then I'll merge and center this twice. That's going to cover that, coloring it back white. And I want to do the same thing with this to make sure that we cover that. Okay, that looks pretty good. I like the way that that looks. Now what we're going to do is we're going to continue with this. So we're going to have the number of days. The penalty type also should be merged and set and include that here as well. So that looks good. That's the drop down list here. Good. So we've got our drop down list. Let's reformat these particular borders, giving them the same borders. I want that dark blue to go in that, and then we'll zoom out a little bit all the way around with the left side dotted line. Looks good. Now on these particular ones, I want to bring that back to that solid line. That's for that larger field here. Okay, that's kind of the basis of our form here. We can add some more border line to keep things integrated here as we move across. And then also we want to add some borders here, here, and here. That's going to look really good with our same borders. So formatting those cells. Now we can also, of course, color the border up here and use this instance up here. We're going to do it right with this one here, and then just surrounded borders. Okay, that's looking good. Our forms are good. Let's go ahead and save our work. We want to add our button sets and our icons, and then we'll get into some VBA, but everything looks pretty good, just the way we want it. I'm going to format these two fields. They're going to be amounts, so we're going to set those to amounts. And then also what I want to do is this is the number of days. So we got 90 days after due date for balances greater than. And then this looks 90 days overdue at. Okay, so it's looking really good. As we select these things, we want to make sure that this is customized as we choose a different one. Now the reminder name, let's merge and center that as well, left justify it. We want to put in that name here. So we're going to put in whatever name. Let's say we want to put in 120 days overdue as we add that a unique name for those reminders. Here's a list of our reminders. As I select a reminder, I want that particular reminder to load up anything previously saved. So what we want to do is we want to add some conditional formatting here. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to select on a bunch of rows here. We're going to go into conditional formatting, manage rules. We're going to add a new rule. We're going to use a formula. It's going to be based on two conditions. The first condition is, so we're going to use and. The first condition is we want to make sure that there is actually a value in column D in any row associated. So we're going to put V. And there does not equal, and then double quotes. The second condition is we want to make sure it's based on even rows. So even rows only. So mod of row 2 equals 0. 0 means that even row. I'm going to give it a format of that. It's going to have a border. It's going to have a lower left. We're going to use the same color we're going to use. We're going to use a dotted line on the left, the lower, and the right side here, clicking OK. I'm going to copy that rule. I also want to give it actually a fill color. So we're going to fill it with a similar color that we've used previously. And that's going to be located right here. It's that light color. So we're going to use fill effects for that light blue. Clicking OK. Now I also want to create a similar rule. So we're going to copy that, Control C. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to add a brand new rule. We're going to use a formula. Again, the only time is difference. We're going to make that change to odd rows. So this is going to be odd rows equals 1. You can give it a format here. It's going to give it that white color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the border. We're going to give it the same border that we did, that dark color here. And then again, on the left, the lower, and the right. Clicking OK. and clicking OK. Clicking apply to make sure that Excel has the correct fields, applies to fields, starting at D5 all the way to 29. Clicking OK. Now what we need to do is just check here. As we add it, we can see that automatically the conditional formatting. We're going to be adding one more rule in there in just a moment. Okay, so what we want to do now is I also want to highlight the selected row. We're going to put some information in here. I want to know what that selected reminder row is, and I want to put that row directly here. So if it's 7, I want to color that row. I also want to put whatever selected reminder ID, each individual payment reminder does have its own ID. So I want to put that ID, I'm going to put it in B4. I also want to know what the row associated with that reminder, call it database rows. What is the row that's associated? These reminders are saved in this list here. We have the reminder ID, the name, the status, the days, the balance threshold, the penalty name, the subject, and the message. So we've got some reminder IDs. I want those IDs to know. I want to know the next reminder ID. Okay, so the payment reminder, the database row that's associated with that. I also want to know the next reminder ID. And the penalty row. What is the row that's associated with the penalty, the select penalty row? Okay, I'll give those a unique color and some borders. So what we're going to do is we're going to color those yellow and give those borders all the way around. And then we'll start adding some information. I will left justify that. And then what is the selected reminder? Let's say we have a reminder ID 3. I want to know the database associated with that. So that means 3 is on row 5 here. So what I've done is I've created a named range called reminder ID. Inside the formulas name manager, we can locate that under reminder ID. So right here is where reminder ID is. It's an offset formula here, and it's going to encompass all the data. So we can use that to determine what row. Our first one starts on row 4, so we need to compensate for that. So if we want to find out which one, so we're going to do equals if error, and then I want to look at that. I want to use a match to find the row. So we're going to match. What are we looking up? We're looking up the reminder ID here. We're looking it up inside the particular named range called reminder ID, and we want an exact match. Once it's found, I want to add 3 because I want to know the row number that's associated. If it is not found, it will create an error. We're going to trim that blank. So that means we know that number 3 is on row 5. I also want to know the next available as we add them equals if error, in case there's no data, there could be an error, max a reminder ID. I want to know the maximum, plus I want to add 1 available for the next one. And of course, if there are none, that means there's no data. We'll just set the default to 1. And the penalty row, what is the row that's associated with this? If we look in the admin, we see our first one is available on row 19. So if I know the first one's on row 19, if it's found, we have a named range for that called penalties, as you saw. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we know the row associated with that. So again, we're going to use equals if error. We're going to run a match. And again, I want to match. What am I looking up? I'm looking up this value, and I'm looking it up based on the penalties. I want an exact match, and I want to know what row it's associated. So I'm going to add 18. I know our first one starts on row 19. So if I add, let's try to get that plus 18 here, it's going to set up that row. Once I know that, if there's an error, I just want to return empty. Okay. All right. So that means our first one, our 90 days overdue, our first one, 5 days, is going to appear on row 19. And that is correct, 19. Okay. So that's it. That's all we need for that. Saving our work. Okay. Let's give this a theme color. And I also want to add another one here called variable. So both of those are going to take on that theme color. So I'm going to format those cells here. And then we'll just do border. We can do all the way around border using our theme color here all the way around with a full line. And also I want to give it a fill effects according to our theme here and just give it a color because that's going to be the header of both our reminders and our variables here and here. Okay, and then make sure the font is bold and italic. All right, so that looks good. So now this one I'm going to put in variables and I'm going to center that also. And so we can go in, center that, and our reminders will go here. So I like the way that that looks. Now I want to make sure that this also has some conditional formatting. I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to paste it right here because I want this to have conditional formatting as well. But I want to make sure that it takes on the rules differently. So we're going to manage those rules. And this one's going to be based on column M. So we just need to change this D here to an M, and it's going to apply to that. Okay, so that looks good for that one. And then I'll change the other one for the even rows here. And I want our variables to take on that conditional formatting as well. We'll be adding some variables, and those are going to be used for our email. So what are those variables? Well, the first thing, I want to have the customer name because I want to make sure that's included inside the emails. The second variable that I want to have is located the invoice number here so that invoice numbers can be included in the emails. And I also want to know the invoice balance. So we'll use brackets around those. So invoice balance. will be our variable here, and we'll use those inside the code. I'm going to show you how to do that. I want to know the penalty amount, so the customer knows the penalty amount. So we're going to put penalty amount as a variable in here. These will be replaced with the actual values. I also want to know how many days overdue, so that we can let the customer know how many days overdue their invoice is. And lastly, we want to know the total due. That's simply going to be the balance along with the penalty amount, total due. Okay, so that's our last variable, and you see how the conditional formatting applies as we add those. As we add the reminders, they will do that. The macro will take care of adding these reminders for us. So that looks pretty good. I like the way that that looks. Let's go ahead and add in our payments and add in our buttons so that we can add it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert here, and then we'll use a shape, and I'll just use the rounded rectangle here. That's pretty standard shape here. And this one's going to be for save reminder. So I'm just going to add that right here. Call that save reminder. Once I get that just the way I like it, I'll go ahead and duplicate that. Giving it a format based on the theme here. You can use this theme here. Okay, I'm going to put it here and here. Okay, I like the way that that looks. And then what I want to do is just let's go ahead and give it a little bit darker color according to our theme. The shape format, I'm going to give it that shape fill and give it that theme color right here. Okay, so we've got that. That looks pretty good. And what I'm going to do now is, and we got save reminder. I'll duplicate that. This one's going to be for add new. So I'm going to place that here. I'll duplicate it one more time. This will be for the delete, and one more time for the check and send reminders. So we'll call this add new. This will be so we can add brand new reminders with just a click of a button. And then I want to be able to delete the reminder along with the warning, letting the user know that, of course, if we delete it, it's gone forever. So we'll add that. And then this one we're going to call check and send reminders, as you may have seen from the sample. If not, no worries. Okay, so check and send reminders. Let's take a look. Payment reminders with penalties, save reminder, add new, delete reminder, check and send reminders. So this is the macro that we're going to assign. This is going to check to see if there's any reminders sent. And if they have not been sent for particular overdue invoices, they will go ahead and send them. We can now add in our logo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert picture and our shapes and icons. And I've got all these saved in a folder. If you do want to get all these along with any resources, along with all the updates that are associated with these applications, updates are based on your feedback, you would want to join our Patreon campaign. Patreon's a great way to get more content, everything for a very low cost. And of course, it also helps support our channel. So I would definitely appreciate that. If you can do that, I would appreciate it. It starts at just $3 a month. So it's a great way to support Excel for Freelancer and also make sure that you get tons more content at a very low cost, and it's customized just for you. All right, I've added these logos while I talk away here. Save reminders and the icon here. I should say that. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to center it and group that. And I'm going to do the same thing here. This is a little bit big for this particular icon, so we'll set that to 0.18. The rest of them are set at 0.12. I'm going to use a control. I'm going to group them together, delete the reminders also here, center and group, and then we're going to do thing for check, and I'm going to make this a little bit larger. Check and send reminders here. So again, doing the same thing and grouping it. Now what I also want to do is I also want to make sure they're all lined up horizontally and vertically. So I'm going to make sure they're in line. I'm going to distribute them. So in the shape format, align, I want distributed horizontally. So that's it. Then what we're going to do is going to group them together. As I possibly adjust these column widths, I certainly don't want to adjust the size of those buttons. So we want to make sure that we're setting the shape options to move but don't size. So that will take care of that. And that's going to go for any shape. Okay, very good. All right, I don't think we're going to use row 2, so we can just move that up a little bit. And so it's exactly the same as my sample. That's always a good idea. All right, so everything is looking good. We're ready. So the first thing what I want to do is I want to do some automation stuff. When I make a change to here, whether it's loading or not, I want to automate this. So that means if it's 5 days overdue, I want to say 5 days overdue at whatever it is. So I want to pull this information, however many days overdue. So this would be 5. This would be 15. Let's make sure it's accurate. So a percentage balance, then I want to change that. So I want this information to be updated automatically. And how's that going to happen? It's going to happen on change event. When I make a change to this particular cell, G8, that's when I want to automate this information. So this could go to percent or dollars based on that. So how are we going to do that? Well, it's going to happen with a change event. So we're going to go into VBA and start with that code. Developer, Visual Basics, you can do this there, Alt F11. Pay reminders, as you see, this is the sheet that we're focused on, pay reminders. And we're going to look into change events. So we're going to go into worksheet, not selection change, at least not yet, and go into change events. So what do we want to focus on? I want to focus just on that cell. G8's the one. If there's a change to that, something's going to happen. So if not intersection is nothing, I want to make sure that G8 contains a value. So this is going to be changed to G8, not H12. That's just some automated. I use AutoHotkey to automate that. And we also want to make sure that G8 contains a value. Range G8 dot value is not equal empty. If that happens, then we want to do something. Well, what do we want to do? Well, I want to make sure that we have a particular correct item here. How do we know if it's correct? We know because B6 is an empty. If they put in a correct information, of course, our data validation is going to tell us, but also we know that on empty or anything like that, B6 is going to be empty. So as long as B6 contains a row, then we know that it's correct. So we can put if range B6 dot value does not equal empty, then we can proceed. So what is it that we want to do? Well, what I would like to do is I want to pull that row. So we're going to dimension, I want the penalty row. So we'll dimension the penalty row as long. And I also want to know the type. Dimension the penalty type as long. Is it a % or is it based on a dollar amount? Penalty type as a string. Okay, so what is that penalty row? That penalty row is based on B6 equals range B6 dot value, okay? Dot value. That's the penalty, the row that's associated with that inside the admin screen, penalty row. Once we have the penalty row, I want to see what type is it. How do I know? Well, I know that if this is the percentage of a balance, I'm going to copy this. Then I know it's a % based. Otherwise, it's a fixed amount, dollar amount. So we can differentiate because the penalty type is going to differentiate based on that. So to do that, we're going to make an update using a little if-then statement. They code if, that's going to be located in admin dot range. And where is that information located that we want to extract? It's located in column N and the penalty row. N and the penalty row dot value equals, and I've already copied it, percentage about, then we know the penalty type. We'll set that penalty type equals %. Penalty type equals %. That's what I want to put in that field, %. Else it's going to be amount, right? So else we can simply put in dollars. Else penalty type equals dollars, because that's the information that I want to store. Okay, so we've got that there. So now what I want to do, so basically what I want to do is I want to take that penalty type, whatever it is, percentage dollars, and I want to put it directly inside K8. So that's where it's going to go, either % or dollars is going to go directly there. Continuing on, now what I want to do is I want to automate in information, additional information inside here. So what I want to put days overdue. So this, however many days overdue, and then the text days overdue. And where's that going to come? It's going to come directly from M. So we could say something like this. Range I8 is the range that I want to put that in. Let's double check that to make sure that dot value, that's where I want to put it inside. That's the cell that I want to put it in, inside the payment reminders, located right here in I8, equals, and it's a combination. So coming directly from the admin dot range. Anytime you misspell something and you try to do that, you know, but as soon as you add in the right spelling and you hit the IntelliSense, it's going to come up. So that's a great way you can tell. That's how I knew I spelled it incorrectly right away. Okay, so it's going to be the admin, what's in column M, and the penalty row dot value, and I want to add something else in. I want to add the text, the other text. So and space days overdue at, and that's good enough. Then what I want to do is I want to add inside whatever's in J8. So what is the at? What is this inside J8? Is it a percentage or is it an amount? It's going to go in J8. And where's it going to come directly from? It's going to come directly from O right here. So we're going to add that in here. So I'm just going to copy this here, and we can actually duplicate it and make the adjustments. So, but it's not going to be I8. This time it's going to be J8. So inside J8, what do I want to put? I want to put whatever's in O, and that is going to be the % or amount. % or amount. So we'll put that in % or amount. Okay, that looks good. So now that's in K8, what do I want to do? I want to put in that type. K8 is going to take on the actual %, the text % or amount. So equals the penalty type. We've already put it inside this particular named range right here. So this particular string here, penalty type. So we're going to put equals, set the penalty type, % or amount. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Now the only thing I want to do is I want to format that, right? So if we're putting in a % or a format, format? I want to format this based on a number or an amount. And now what do I want to format? I want to format this particular cell that's located where the amount is located right here inside here. So J8 is going to be formatted. Either it's going to be take on the format or it's going to take on a percentage. So we want to format it based on the type. So range J8 dot value. So it's going to be probably an if then. So if penalty type is equal to %, then I want to make that change. Then what's it J8, not the value, but the number format. Dot number format equals what? We'll set that as a %. So it's going to be something very similar to what we would find a percent. 0 point, let's say 0, 0, and you can put in as many decimals as you want. So we'll do 1, like 8.5 or something, %. So that's the format it's going to take on. Else, the number format's going to take on a dollar amount. So copy this, else the format's going to be equal to, we can put something like the dollar, you can put whatever currency you want. I'm going to put in dollars. I'll put in a pound sign here for the format, dot, and then 00 for 2 decimals. Okay, so it's going to take on that format for $sign. So that way we differentiate. And then what we'll do is we'll just clear the additional details. We will save our work before running our code. And that's going to be based on a change so we can check it now. So if we make changes to 60 days overdue, we say 60 days overdue, $20.50. So let's double check that. For 60 days, $20.50. That looks pretty correct. So let's change it to 50 and make sure that that works inside here. Just double clicking now will automatically. Okay, so that's good, looking good. So it changed to $50. But what about if it's a percentage? Let's take a look. We have 120 days is 5%, a percentage of balance. So when we change this to 120 days here, we want to make sure that the percentage updated is now in a percentage format, and this changed to percent, 100 overdue. Okay, at 5%. Okay, so that's looking really good. I like the way that looks, that little code automatically. And now when I load in these reminders, I want to load that in, but we're going to get to that inside a minute. That's going to be on selection change. One other additional code I want to add in here is basically the conditional formatting for the selected row. So we're going to go into the home, conditional formatting. We're going to manage those rules. I'm going to probably just copy the applies to here. And then I'm going to click a new rule. Let's use a formula. And this is going to be based on the row here. So B2 equals the row. I want to color the selected row. So row, beginning and parentheses. I'm going to format that. I'm going to do the fill effects here. And then what we'll do is we'll just do that darker color according to our theme that we're using here. I also want to give it a white font so that it stands out. I want to make sure it's bold. So the font's going to be bold and white, and I'm going to click OK and click OK and click OK. So now you see that row 7's colored, row 8, and so as we select it, that row is going to go in here. So as we add them, so now what I want to do is I want to take all the reminders that we've saved and I want to load them here. I want to create a macro that's going to put all the reminder names. So it's going to be here. So I want to take these reminder names here, 30, 90, and 60 days, and I want to add them directly in here. But I don't want to just add those names. I want to add the IDs in here. And this is going to be hidden. They'll be hidden, but I want to put the IDs in here. And the idea is when I select a reminder, I want to know the name and the ID that's located here, I want to put directly inside B3. What that's going to do is going to automatically calculate the row that's associated, and I can load that on. So that's going to happen. So the first thing what we want to do is we want to create a macro that's going to actually load that list up. And I want a unique list, and I want to put that list right here. So I want the reminder IDs and the days, and I want to determine how many there are, and I want to bring them directly over inside this screen. Okay, so let's write a macro that's going to do that. So we're going to go inside the module called payment reminders here. And you see I've got some macro, the types of macros that are loaded here that we're going to be covering today. So we're going to be doing these. And this one I've just mentioned some variables to make things a little bit quicker. Last row, last results row, the reminder row, and the reminder column. These are going to help us as we move through the macros. So the first one we're going to be doing is called pay reminder load list. This is the macro that's going to determine all the reminders that we've created, and we're going to add them in. And so every time we go ahead and save a reminder, it's going to automatically update this list. The first thing we want to do is clear any details out inside that. So this sheet is called payment reminders. So we're going to focus on that sheet, pay reminders dot range. I'm going to clear any details out. So what is it? D5 all the way through a large row, but we're actually going to use C5 because that's where our IDs are located. So C5 through D, and then just use large row here, dot clear content. So clear out any previous reminders and IDs. So the IDs are located in column C. So once we have done that, we can then add in the additional information. So first thing I want to focus on is the reminder row. So with the reminders list, that's the list of reminders that we have. That's this sheet. Reminders list is this sheet right here. I'm going to run an advanced filter, really focused on these two columns here. That's all I really need. And I want to determine the last row. If the last row is less than 4, we can exit the sub. There's no data. If there is data, we're going to run an advanced filter, no criteria. All I just want is unique values here. The reason we want to do this is we can then sort them and work with this data as opposed to just copying them from here. So it's kind of a nice way to do it. It gives you the ability to sort them. Maybe we want to sort them alphabetically or numerically or something like that. So I like to bring them in a different area. Okay, so we're going to do that with reminders list. I'm going to determine the last row. What is the last row? Well, the last row is going to be based on column A. So if the last row is less than 4, we can exit the sub. If it's not, then we can move on to the advanced filter. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I want to get the unique names. Now, when we run an advanced filter without any criteria, meaning we're just bringing the data over and I just want the unique data, I want to make sure that any criteria that got created previously or maybe in another macro gets deleted. That's very important. So the first thing what we want to do is run on-air resume next and delete any criteria that may have been created before. So we can do names, criteria, and criteria is the named range that gets created automatically when we create an advanced filter that contains criteria. And on air go to 0. If we look in the name manager formulas, name manager, we'll see several named range based on criteria. So these are all get created automatically when we use advanced filters. This is what I'm deleting. And usually there's one per sheet. Any sheet that we create in an advanced filter that contains criteria, VBA will create this named range automatically. So it is this what we are deleting, because when we run an advanced filter that has no criteria, it is used and it's hidden, which we don't want to use it. So we basically just have to delete it. Okay, so that's going to delete any criteria if it exists. If it doesn't exist, it would create an error. So therefore we wrapped it in on-air resume next and on-air go to 0. Once we have that, what we can do is we can run an advanced filter. Now this advanced filter is not going to have any criteria here. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to clear it out. No criteria. What is the range that we're going to be focusing on? We're focusing on just here, reminder ID A3 through B3. So A3 through B3, because that's the only one, and the last row, whatever the last row is. And what do I want that? I want to bring that information over. We can raise this up now. We're not going to be using it. I want to bring that unique over to both M2 through N2. So M2 through N2 is where our results are going to go. So I'm going to change this to N2. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to determine the last results row. So the last results row is equal to based on column M. So M is our last. If the last results row is less than 4, we have no data. So last results row is less than 3, we have no data, right? So if it's less than 3, we got nothing. If it's not, then what we would do is bring it over. Now to notice our first results row starts in row 3 and our first results row starts in row 5. So we need to compensate for that difference when we bring it over. Assuming that we do have data, we can then bring it all the way over. But maybe we're going to do it sort. So why don't we sort that first? If it's just one row of data, we don't need to sort it. It would be nice to sort it alphabetically so that things look in order. If last result row is less than 4, that means we have only one row of data. Then go to no sort. We'll skip down here and go to no sort. So that's what's going to happen as long as there's just one row of data. If there is data, whoops, let's put a colon there. I want a colon there here. Okay, so if there is data, we're going to run a sort. So with sort, I got that automated a little bit to make things faster. We're going to update the sheet. This sheet is reminder list. So I'm going to copy that here. Instead of tasks, I'm going to put it here and I'm going to put it here. So focus on that. So we're going to clear the fields out. Do the reminder list. Now, what field are we sorting? We are sorting it based on, let's use the name. Okay, so that name is going to be located right here in N3. N3 is where our name is. So I'm going to put N3. That is the field that we're going to be here. That's our key field. So N3. Now, what is the range? Is going to be based on M through N. So M3 through N. And I want it sorted ascending. So that's nice. Okay, so that's going to sort them automatically. I'm going to save our work. And then what we want to do is once we have it, I want to bring that range over. Go down here. I'm just simply going to bring it over into our payment reminder fields. Okay, so it's going to be pay reminders dot range. We know it starts in C is where we want to put that reminder ID, C5 through D and the last result row plus 2. Because we need to compensate for that difference, dot value equals dot range M3 through N and the last results row dot value. So bring over unique reminders. Okay, very good. What we're going to do is we're going to save our work. I'm going to run that code. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check for this error. So advanced filter copied to range. M, that's not going to work. N2. Okay, so continuing on. Okay, that looks pretty good. Our ID right here, but I don't want to show this ID. I know it exists, but I don't want to show it. I want to hide it. So I'm going to go into Home. I'm going to go into the formats, more number formats. I'm going to choose Custom. And I'm going to choose 2 or 3 semicolons. 2 for numbers, 3 for alphanumeric. So what that's going to do is hide it. Now, if I select on the cell, we still see it. It's located, but it's not there. Okay, great. So I like that. Next up, what I want to do is I want a macro. When I select something, I want all the details of that particular reminder to load up into these fields. Now I've created something called data mapping already to help us move things along, and it's data mapped here. So that means that reminder name is located in G4. If you've seen any of my videos before, this is familiar, but repetition will help. Status is located in K4. So K4 you see is the status here. K6 is going to be located at the greater than amount here. So it's all mapped to this, K6, G8, and G10. So all I need to do is loop from 2 to the last column. What is that last column? That last column is 8. So I'm going to loop from 2 to 8. And as we then bring it up, so that's all we're going to do on load, and simply look, determine the row, bring whatever is found in that row and put it into G4, whatever's found in the row and put it into K4, and just loop through that automatically. So that's what we're going to do on load. It makes things a lot quicker. Okay, so the first thing what we want to do is write the macro before we run it, save it, and load it. So the first thing we can do is using save, and the second one we'll do is load it. So when we save it, we need to make sure that it has a few things. So focus on with pay reminders. That's the sheet that we're focused on. Notice I always put that dot just to make sure I spell it right. When I put that in IntelliSense comes up, I know that I've spelled it right. If I spell it wrong, and nothing's going to happen. Okay, so to do that, now what I want to do is I want to just make sure on the first one, when we add that save, I want to make sure that it contains at least a name. So I want to make sure that G4 is not empty. If G4 is empty, I want to let the user know. If .range G4.value equals empty, then prompt the user. Then prompt the user, let the user know. Message box, please make sure to add a reminder name. Okay, exit sub. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to determine, is it a brand new payment or is it an existing one? How are we going to know the difference? We're going to look directly to B4. We know that if B4 contains a value, we know it's existing. However, as soon as we clear that reminder ID, we know B4 is empty. So we're going to determine that. Okay, so B4 is going to let us know if it's new or not. So to do that, we are going to make the update accordingly based on that pay row. Okay, so let's write that up right now. If .range B4.value equals empty, then it's a brand new one. Else it's an existing. Else existing. So we know if it's a new one, we need to assign a brand new row. New payment reminder. So we need to assign a row. So what is that row going to be? So the reminder row, that reminder row, it's going to be the first one available on the payment list equals reminder list dot range A999.end XLUp.row plus 1, first available row. Once we have assigned that row, I want to then add in that reminder ID, the next available reminder ID. So that next available one is going to be located right here in B5. I want to place that directly inside B3. So .range B3.value equals .range B5.value. Okay, so once we have added that, we also want to add that same one inside column A. So that's going to be next reminder ID. I want to take that same one and I want to put it directly inside here. Reminders, column A, and the reminder row. And the reminder row dot value equals whatever's in B3. B3, okay? So we have that available to us. That's going to be the next reminder ID. Same item. Okay, once we have that, what else do we want to do? Well, that's it for the new ones. What if it's an existing? If it's an existing, all I want to do is extract that reminder row directly from B4. So the reminder row, it's the only thing we need to do for existing. Reminder row is equal to whatever's in B4. I'm going to call that existing reminder row. So that's it. Everything else is going to be regardless if it's a new or an existing. So what I want to do is I want to save it for using a loop for reminder column, which is a long variable, equals 2 to 8. This is what I was discussing before. Next reminder column. So what do we want to do? Well, basically I want to take, when we're saving it, I want to take whatever's in the cells dot range and I want to place them directly inside the database. So where are those cells located? It's located inside the reminder list. That dot cells, we're using cells because both the column and the row are variable. Row 1 and the reminder column, dot value. So that's the cell right there, dot value. So that cell, G8, whatever it is, K8, is going to be the value. So whatever that is going to equal, we're going to put that directly inside the database because we're saving it. So where's that database? It's the reminders list dot cells, whatever row. So we've already set the reminder row. What is the column? Reminder column dot value equals. So that's it. So basically whatever's located in this cell, it's going to be put directly inside the database. Add data to database. So that's all we have to do for the loop. Relatively easy there. Fix this here. Okay, so also want to make sure that when we add it, we're using large amounts of data, we're saving it. Well, let's see what happens. I want to wrap the text. Right, if I have a large amount of data, I don't want it to do this. What I want to do is I want to wrap the text. So basically inside VBA, I just want to do that. So we can do that with the entire row. So we can do that inside VBA, simply something like this, reminder list dot range. And then we can just add the row in, reminder row and colon and the reminder row dot wrap text equals false. Okay, so that's going to just keep that from growing. We don't need that in the database. It's not important. Okay, so very good. So we've added that in. And now what I want to do is right after we save it, I want to run this macro in case it's a brand new one or in case we've made any change. I want to run this. And the reason that's important is if we add a new one, we want to make sure it's included inside the list. So we're going to do end with. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save that. Okay, so very good. Now let's take a look at what we have here. We already have data 1, 3, and 4, 30, 90, and 60 day. Okay, so right now we're on 120 days. If it's a new one or an existing one, so let's go ahead and make this, change this to, let's say 120 days. I like that. 120 days. So we're just making the updates here. And then let's change this to 50. So this is going to be the existing one. We're changing the existing one. And let's add in, I'm just going to copy whatever we have over here into the subject a little bit quicker. So I'm going to take that subject and I'm going to paste it directly in here. I'm also going to take whatever's reminder located here, Control A, Control C, back inside here. I'm just going to paste it in here. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to left justify both of these, holding down the control. And I also want to make sure that this particular one is upper, all right? So vertically up. Okay, so I like that. Now what I'm going to do, this is an existing reminder here on row 5. I'm going to save that. So I want to take this button here, hold the control and assign that brand new macro. And we're going to go all the way down here to payment reminder and then save and update and select that. That's going to be the one we're saved. Clicking save is going to update that. Okay, so let's take a look and see how we did there. 120, 120, everything got saved. Inside the reminders list, okay, we do need to wrap the text up. I'll make sure that that's right. That looks good. So this is the one we saved, and then we'll just update that and then change that. I like that. Okay, good. All right, so that's looking good. It's saved 120, 120, 50. Everything got saved into row 5, just as we thought. Perfect. So I like the way that though it's now saving. But what I want to do is I want to load it. Now I want to bring the information back into the form. When I make a selection on one of these, I want to take whatever's there and I want to bring it back into this form. So how are we going to do that? It's going to be on a macro called sub payment reminder load. So when I make a selection, I'm going to take whatever values here. That's the ID. I'm going to place it directly inside B3. I'm also going to take whatever row is selected and I'm going to put it in B2. Then I'm going to run the macro to load it. So the first thing we want to make sure is that we have an accurate row located here in B4. So first of all, we're going to do with pay reminders. I want to clear out some cells. That's very important that we're going to clear out some cells and with. Okay, so when we have that, I want to make sure that we are going to clear. So what are the cells that we need to clear out? First thing, before we clear out, we want to make sure that we have the correct row associated. First thing I want to do is clear out all the cells, except I don't want to clear out anything associated here. I don't want to clear out B3, and I don't want to clear out the selector of B2. But I want to clear out all these cells. So what are those cells? So the first thing I want to do is dot range. And then we're going to clear out associated cells G4 through H4. I also want to clear out K4. I also want to clear out G6 and K6, as well as G8 through, and I'll bring this down here, H8. Okay, so let's take a look at that so we can get the right cells. Bringing that down here so we can take a look at both. Okay, so G8 through H8. And then I also want to do K8. So let's take a look here. K8 we also want to do. So comma K8. Also, we want to make sure that we're going to bring inside G10 through K10, G10 through K10. That's going to be for our email subject, and then lastly the message here. So what's that message going to be? G12 all the way through K33. So we need to clear out those through K33. Dot clear content. So clearing out those fields. Clear out form fields. Okay, once they're cleared out, we can then determine the rows. So we can check that. If dot range B4 dot value equals empty, then message box, please select a correct reminder, although it should never happen. Exit sub, but we certainly need B4 as a value. So that reminder row is going to be based on B4 equals dot range B4 dot value. Once we have the row, all we need to do is just do the data mapping just like we did here, except it's going to be in reverse. So I'm simply going to copy that and then reverse it up. I'm going to paste it down here, except this time we're taking data from the database and bringing it into that. So taking the data from the database, bringing it into the form here. So all we need to do is reverse this and put that equals here. So bring data from database. So add data to form field from database. Okay, so I like that there. So basically it's coming from the database here into the fields here. So once we do that, that's pretty much it. That's all we have to do for the load. I'm going to save our work as we should, and I want to add this macro. So I'm going to copy this macro, and then we're going to write a little code. When do we want it to happen? We make a selection change on D5 all the way down, and I want to make sure that there's actually a value in column D. So that's going to happen on selection change. When we go into the payments, right? So pay reminders, this is the worksheet selection change. This is where we're going to write our code. First of all, if target dot count large, I'm just going to write this code. It helps keep errors is greater than, let's say, 1, then exit sub. That means if the user selects a large number of cells, it's just going to exit. Okay, so if not, I want to make sure, again, it's going to focus on D5, starting at D5, all the way down D5 through a large number, D99. That'll encompass all the ones. Is nothing. And range D and the target dot row dot value does not equal empty. Then we want to do something. What is it that we want to do? I want to make sure, do a few things. First thing, I want to put that row, whatever row we've selected, I'm going to put that directly inside B2. So taking that target row, that's going to trigger conditional formatting. So range B2 dot value equals the target row. Okay, that's going to trigger conditional formatting. Next up, I want to take whatever ID and I want to put that into B3. So range B3 dot value equals, where is it located? It's located range C and the target dot row dot value. That is our reminder ID. Reminder ID. Once I have the reminder ID, I can then run the macro. Run macro to load reminder. That's all we need for that. Relatively simple that. Okay, again, always saving our work before we move forward, especially when we're clearing out contents. Selecting on a cell, okay, 120 days, 30 days, that looks good. Okay, let's change this to back to 15 days to make sure we're getting things saved. 15, changing this to 15, and changing this to 15 here. Okay, that looks good. Changing this to 15 if we have things. Okay, saving that reminder. Notice it got updated here. 15 days, you do 15 days. When I make a change to the name, it automatically updates in this field, and that's what I like. Okay, great. So we're saving, we're loading. Now let's go ahead and add a macro for add new. When we add a new one, all I pretty much want to do is clear the same fields out that we did on load. So I'm just going to close this out for now, and I'm going to copy this field because that's one of the most important things that we need to do when we add a new one. So here's the add new macro. So pay reminders dot, let's see, range. The only difference is when I add new, I want to make sure that we're clearing out both the selected row and the selected reminder ID. So we're going to add in B2 and B3 to the clear content. So B2 and B3. Okay, so once we add those, so that's it for that macro. And then we may also want to set some defaults. Let's go ahead and set K4 to active, just in case. And then we can change this to active. Let's go ahead and add some data validation to that. And then we'll just do list here, and then we'll make it active and then inactive. And that way we'll decide if we don't want to send out a reminder, we can just make it inactive and it will not be sent regardless, only when it's active. Okay, continuing on. So let's set the default to active. Pay reminders dot range K4 dot value equals active. That's going to set the default. Set default. Okay, and now all we need to do is just take this and assign it to both the button and the icon. Right clicking on it, scroll down to pay reminders and then add new. That's the one we want. Click OK. Saving our work always before we run a macro. Click add new. It's going to save those. Okay, it unselected it. That's what I want. No assigned rows. And let's add a new one now. So just so we know it's going to add a new one. So let's do, I think we have 15, 30, and 60. So let's go ahead and add in 120 days overdue. Okay, create the reminder here. So for 120 days, we're going to be adding that in. It's greater than, let's do zero balance here. We want to set the penalty type to 120 days overdue at 5%. Email subject, I'm just going to pull the subject because I don't want to retype it all. And you guys probably watch me type enough, so you don't need to see me type too much more. Okay, hey, if you like these templates and you want 250 of them, a great way is to pick up our 250 workbook template pack. I've got that on sale now. I'll include the links down below, and that also helps support the channel. Okay, so I've got this reminder name, this all set up here. I'm going to save the reminder, and we see now that it's been added here, and it's also automatically alphabetized properly. We can double click, it's going to increase that column. Okay, things are looking really, really good. I've got that here. Now all we need to do is just add a macro for delete and then check and then send reminder. So let's add in the delete here. So that's the next macro that we're going to write. So when we delete it, I want to differentiate a few things. If I add a new reminder and I decide to delete it before saving it, all I need to do is really clear the contents. However, if it's on an existing one, I not only need to determine the database row in B4, then delete it from this. Okay, and I think that wrap text needs to be fixed on that. So, oh, I know that was the one I double clicked on. Remember, when you double click on something, it's going to automatically increase just like that. So I manually the wrap text is working correctly on that. Okay, so continuing on. So let's focus on delete. The first thing we want to do is let the user know, give them a warning. So I've got that automated here to make things a little bit easier. Are you sure you want to delete this? Let's change that from appointment to payment reminder. And then we'll change the title, and that's going to give the user an out just in case they want to escape out or delete payment reminder. Okay, once we have that, what I want to do is I want to determine if it is an existing one or a saved one. So how do we know that? With, let's say, pay reminders. If .range B4, that's our row, equals empty, then we're going to skip it. Go to not saved. And we're going to go down here and go add a not saved and add a colon there. And then the next thing we're simply going to do is just run the macro that add new. In the meantime, if it has been saved, I want to set the reminder row is going to be equal to whatever's in B4. Then we're going to delete it based on the payment list. Equals B4, set row. Once I know the row, I can delete it from the reminders list. So reminders list dot range, reminder row and colon and the reminder row dot entire row dot delete. I'm going to delete that row. Delete database row. Okay, very good. I like that. But I also want to do things. Once I delete it, I want to reload this list up here. So I'm going to copy this list right here. I want to load it because we just deleted an item, and I want to make sure that we redo the list. Before or after we add new, we're going to redo the list right here. Okay, so we're going to update the list. Let's save our work, and let's add that macro to the button. So right click here, hold the control button down here, clicking on that, and then we're going to just click assign macro, and we're going to drill down here all the way to pay reminder delete. Okay, we delete this reminder. Are you sure? Go to not saved. Not, that means it's just not spelled right, saved. Are you sure you want to delete this payment reminder? Yes. Okay, you're going to delete that payment reminder, clear it out, deleted it from the list. Okay, so the concept of this macro is, first of all, I want to go through all the reminders, and I want to separate those inactive from active. We want to run some criteria. Only those statuses with active we're going to consider. So we're going to get those results here. Once we do that, I want to get all the results right here. And I want to know what each one of their penalty types is. So based on the particular reminder penalty name, I want to extract what type of penalty. So once I have the penalty, I want to know the penalty amount. So determining, so we know that the 30-day notice, if we take a look inside this, we see inside this one, the 30-day penalty has been assigned. We see it's using percentage of balance, and it's the 3%. So I'm going to extract that out for each one of those. And I want to put it inside a column. So once we have that, then I understand the penalty that's going to be assigned. Then I want to do is I want to look for any invoices that have not more than 30 days overdue that yet have not yet received this particular email or this particular penalty. So we're going to run through that. Now, Inside, remember, in this particular application, we're creating invoices. Those invoices are saved inside a list called invoice list. So here's an invoice list, and each one has a balance, so we know that the current balance. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to determine which ones have a balance. Then, so if there's anything with balance, I want to return that in this list. Then what I want to do is I want to use a formula to determine if we have a payment reminder that's been sent or not sent based on this. So for example, this has been sent. How do we know this has been sent? Invoice ID number 6. We see that there's a balance of 974. We see it is probably more than 60 days overdue. Right now it's January 10th today, or January 11th here. So we see that this is more than 60 days overdue. However, it's been sent. How do we know it's been sent? If we take a look inside the reminder log, this is the log of all the reminders that were sent. So they're sent, right? We have a sent date. We have the customer that it's been sent. Once it gets sent, the ID that's been sent, right? The reminder ID, remember, that comes directly from our list of reminders right here. And we also have the invoice number. So I know that for invoice number 6 here, reminder ID was already sent. And I also know that reminder ID 4 was already sent, the 60-day email, because it's in this list here. So we know it's already been sent. If I were to delete this here, then we take a look back on the invoice list here, we see that this just changed to not sent because it is based on a formula. And let's go over, this formula includes some named range. So I want to include you on those named range and see just about that. So they're based on the reminder log. So every time we send a reminder, it gets tracked inside this log, who it got sent to, when it got sent, and all that information. So I've got some named ranges based on the reminder ID and the invoice number. So we're going to go into the formulas, name manager, and we're going to look down inside here under reminder log. So the reminder log, there's 2 named ranges that are associated. Using the offset formula, we've got one based on the invoice number here. You see the dancing ants around the invoice number. We've also got one around the reminder ID here. So what I need to do is I need to know a formula. I need to look for a formula that says, okay, has reminder ID been sent for invoice number 6 or not? So we look inside the invoice list. I know this is invoice ID, and I know that is reminder number 1. So how do I know if it's been sent? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through that. As we loop through the reminders, we're going to loop through these reminders here. As we do that, let's go here. This is what I want to show you here. As we loop through each one of these reminders, 3, 4, remember they're all active. I'm going to take this ID, whatever ID that we're seeing, as we loop through them, I'm going to take this ID and I'm going to place it directly inside here, this Y2. So what this formula is going to do is going to simply use in some product formula, and it's going to look inside this list, the reminder ID, is there an instance where it equals Y2? And is there another instance where the invoice number, which is located here, equals AA4? So basically, when those 2 conditions are found, we know that this is 0. If it's not found, it's going to be 0. If it's found, it's going to be 1. How do we know that? Well, all we need to do is just copy this, and then we can just escape out of there, and we just put that in, separate that formula. It's a great way to see that, and we can just see that it is 0. However, as soon as I add 6 and 1, it's going to be found. Okay, so this is going to tell. So if it is not found, right, if it's greater than 0, we know it's been sent. If it's not sent, all I need to do is simply loop through all these, and anything that has been not sent, I can then send. So that's essentially what we're going to do inside our macro. Okay, so let's start writing that macro and see how we're going to do it. So I've mentioned a bunch of variables that are going to help us. We want to send the email out. Continuing on, let's go ahead and focus on that. The first part of this particular macro is we want to make sure that we're going to run an advanced filter. Okay? We also actually have to make sure that we have details. So we're going to focus on that reminder list first. This is the first one. We want to run that advanced filter, making sure that we're only focused on those reminders that are currently active. That's why we can exclude anything else. So with reminders list, this list is the one we're going to run our advanced filter. I want to determine the last row. Last row is going to be based on column A. If the last row is less than 4, we're going to exit the sub. However, if it's not, we're going to get the unique names and IDs. I want to make sure to get those unique names. How do we do that? So I actually just want to make sure that we're clearing out any previous results. So dot range, And then we want to do starting with T3 all the way through AC, just a large row, dot clear contents. Okay, so that means it's going to clear any prior results. So let's put a note here, clear any prior results. Once those are cleared out, we can then run our advanced filter. So our advanced filter is going to be based on our criteria. Now our criteria is going to be located on the active. So let's take a look at the original data. It starts out here in A3 all the way through H. So that's what we're going to put, A3 through H. Our criteria is going to be Q2 through Q3. So we're going to change this to Q2 through Q3, just that active status. And where do we want those results to go? I want the results to go all the way from T all the way through AA, and T2 through AA, and unique results. Now I'm going to determine the last results row. Now that last results row is going to be based on column T. That's the last results. If the last results are less than 4, we can exit the sub. So we can do that actually less than 3. We can exit the sub because there is no data. Maybe there's no active reminders. Okay, if we do have active reminders, we can move forward. And the first thing what I want to do once I have the data, I want to extract these particular penalty types and penalties. So how do I do that? How do I know? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up this penalty name and I'm going to determine what row is located on it, and then I'm going to extract the percentage. And I can do that with a match and index match formula. So we're going to index N19 through N28. Let's take a look inside the admin. We're indexing N19 through N28. I'm going to determine the row and I want to extract this amount. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, except I'm going to extract either the percentage or the amount, and that's going to be indexing column O of our admin. So we can do that through these two formulas here. So as you can see, we're going to match. We're running the index. What are we matching? I'm matching whatever's in Y3. So as we bring down these formulas, it's automatically going to bring down. I'm looking up. I'm using a match. I'm determining what row using our named range and our penalties. We want an exact match and we want in that column. So I'm using the index match to extract both the penalty type in this one, and in this one, we're going to extract the penalty amount from column O. So I want to bring down these formulas starting here all the way to here. So we can do that in the next line of code. So dot range, where's the formulas? The formulas are going to start out inside here, AB3 through AC and the last result. So last result row dot formula. And where are they coming from? They're coming from row 1. So dot range AB1 through AC1 dot formula. Bring down penalty details, okay, from the formula. That's very important because when we add in those penalties, we need to know what type they are. Okay, so once we have added that in, we brought that down there, we can then continue on. I want to determine the last invoice row. So what is the last invoice? Last invoice row is going to be based on the invoice list equals the invoice list dot range A99, because we're going to run an advanced filter on all those invoices, dot end. And of course, if we don't have any invoices, we can exit this up, dot row. So last invoice row. So that means that on this invoice list right here, I want to know the last row here. It's 14 here. So I want to determine the last row. If the last invoice row, if the last invoice row is less than 3, then exit sub. Exit on no invoices. Assuming that we do have invoices, we can then run an advanced filter for those invoices. So we continue on. We're going to be creating emails, and I've dimensioned the Outlook application as an object, so we can set that. It's going to be late binding, so we're going to set that Outlook app is going to be equal to create object, creating an email object. So we're going to use Outlook for that. So that object is going to be Outlook.application, and then in quotations. So that's the object, create Outlook application. We'll create that email a little bit later on, so that email is going to also be. So we're just going to simply set that up. Okay, continuing on. Now what we want to do I want to loop through, again, we need to loop through those reminders. So for the result row, so these results here inside the reminders list, I'm going to loop through 4-3 to the last results row. We've already determined in column T, so we need to loop through every single one of the reminders. For result row equals 3 to the last result row. I'm going to loop through active payment reminders. We got to make sure we close our loop. Next result row. Okay, so once we're inside this loop, what I want to do, I want to extract some information out. So I also want to clear any details from the invoice list. We're going to be running an advanced filter in the invoice list. If we take a look inside the invoice list, I want to run an advanced filter based on a due date and based on a balance. Now, we need to know what that information is, and we're going to put those results here, but I want to clear the results out. So AA3 all the way through AK and down, I'm going to clear that out. Invoice list.range AA3 through, let's just say AK, because the form is going to be brought down. Use a large row, dot clear content. Okay, clear invoice results. So now once we have cleared the end results, I want to set some information. We're going to come back directly to the reminders list, and I want to set some variables. I want to know the reminder ID. I want to know what reminder was located in you. So I want to put that information in because we're going to need that inside the email and information. So we're going to put that in. So the reminder ID, where is it located? It's located inside T.range, T in the result row, T and the result row dot value. So that is the reminder ID located directly in there. So what else do I want? I also want the reminder. So I'm going to copy this and then just adjust it accordingly. So the reminder, this variable here, that's a reminder text. That's going to be located in column U. So I want to know that. That is reminder name. Okay, so the reminder name, now that we have the reminder name, I also want to know the penalty name. So penalty, again, another string variable here. And where is it located? That's going to be located inside. Our penalty name is going to be, why is the penalty name? Let's spell that right. All right, next up, after we determine the penalty name, I want to know the number of due days. Due days, and where are we going to figure that out? The due days are going to be located directly inside W. We're going to need that. So I'm going to copy this and I'm just going to update that to W, and we're going to call that due days. Okay, once we have the due days from column W, we also want to know the balance threshold. So we're going to call that balance threshold because we need to know that also in there to make sure threshold is equal to X. This one's coming directly from X, as you see in column X. And that will put a label on that called the balance threshold. That means balances under that will not get met. So only for balances over that amount. I also want to know the subject and the message. Where's the subject is going to come directly from Z and the message is going to come from AA. So we're going to have the subject is going to be equal to Z. Here, that's going to be our email subject. That's going to get updated. Subject equal to X in the results row. That's going to come, let's put that in Z. And then also want the email message. So email subject. And then also I want the email message. So let's do this. A message, that's the variable that I've assigned, string variable. And that's going to come into AA and bring that into the variable. We're going to need to add in our variables for that. So we want to make sure that we get all that information. So email message. So lots of variables that we're going to be using because we need to create the dynamic emails. I also want to know, here comes the penalty type. This one is located inside column AB. So this is the one we want, AB. Penalty type. All very important information that we're going to be adding in. I also want to know, what is the penalty amount? So the penalty amount is going to be equal to, that's going to be coming, it's either a percentage or an amount. It's going to be coming into AC. So this is going to be the percentage or dollar per amount. Okay, so once we have the penalty, I want to then take that information. So inside the invoice list, now we know that we have the number of days here. So what I want to do is I want to take the invoice list right located inside here and add some criteria into that right in here. So I'm going to add in the date. So I'm going to take the current date and I'm going to subtract out the number of days. I'm going to get this here. So if we take a look at 4487, we copy this, put it into another cell, this 4487, and we format that as a date, we're going to see that that is a short date, the format. Now that particular date is 11/12, so it's basically 60 days prior to the current date. So the last time we did a 60 days. So I want to take the current date and subtract out, and then I want to put anything less than or equal to that. So I'm going to put that directly in the invoice list W3. So we're going to write that in right now after the penalty here. So invoice list dot range W3 dot value is, we can do for dot formula, dot value is simply equal to, this can be used for our criteria. And where are we going to find that? It's going to be found in AC and the formula. Let's go back here into our reminders list, and we see that inside AC is that penalty. So that penalty, that we've already had that inside here, so we can use the penalty and we can add in that. So it's going to be, but we're going to add in less than that. So less than or equal, we're going to use the integer of that. So continuing on here, equals, we're going to use the test less than or equal, and what else? And we're going to use the date, but I want to know the date minus the current date. So we're going to use, I'm going to use integer because I want the whole date, and we're going to use CDBL. Okay, that's going to be that double. That's very important so that we can get the date in that number format. I want the current date, but I want it in the number format, and I'm going to subtract out the number of due days. Due days. Okay, so that's it, due days. That's the variable. That's the due days that we extracted directly from here in column W. So once we have that, it's going to be equal and integer of that. We want to make sure we add that in. We don't need this extra parameter. We can get rid of that one there. That's going to create that due date criteria. Create due date criteria. Okay, so once we have that, I also want to add in one more thing. Where do I also, if we take a look inside this invoice list, we see that we have what is the balance. So I need to add that in as well. It has to be greater than that balance because that's part of our reminders. If we take a look in the reminders, we need to know due dates after greater than if it's this number here. So we need to add that in also inside our criteria, and we want to add it in directly inside X3. So we're going to write that in right now. I'm just going to copy this here and then paste it below. So invoice, this time X3 is going to be greater, X, that should be X, is going to be, and then we'll put in the greater sign. And we also want to put in that balance amount. So it's going to be greater than the balance threshold. That's the variable. So it's going to be called our balance criteria, balance criteria. Because I want to know only invoices that are greater than that. Okay, so once we have that, I also want to add in something inside Y. Remember that reminder ID? That's important because that's going to help us in our formula to know if it's been sent or not for that particular reminder. So Y2 is going to take on that. So we're going to put in Y2. It's going to take on that reminder ID. So it's this one right here, this variable ID. We're going to put directly in there. Use, we're going to put a comment there, used in sent, not sent formula. Okay, very good. Okay, so now we have that. We're going to send or not sent. Now we're ready to run our advanced filter. So basically we've set up our criteria here. We're setting up this to add on our formula. We're simply going to run an advanced filter. Our criteria is here. Our results are going to appear here. As our results appear here, I'm going to determine the last row of the results. I'm going to take this formula and I'm going to copy down here. And it's going to tell us what's been sent or what's not been sent. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through these. If it's not sent, I'm going to send an email to this customer based on this information. So that's exactly what we're going to do right now. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is run an advanced filter. Now we're going to focus primarily on the invoice list here. So with the invoice list, that's the one we want to do. We already determined the last row. We know the last row here. If we've set up the last invoice row, that's the one we're going to run our advanced filter on. So we know we've got it there. So, but I also want to clear any previous contents of that. So let's make sure to see if we did that invoice list. Oh, good. I've cleared the contents out here. Good. That's important. We don't need to do it a second time. Now that we have that, we're going to run our advanced filter. So advanced filter, we're going to run that. So let's take a look at our original data here. And it's located in A2 all the way through J2. So that's where our original data is going to go. A2 here through J, and it's not the last row, it's the last invoice row. So we need to update that variable accordingly. Our criteria, what's our criteria? Our criteria is located all the way over here from W2 through X3. W2, that's where our criteria is, W2 through X3. And where's our results going to go? Our results are going to come directly in here. AA all the way to AJ. That's where our results are going to come. So let's program that in. A through AJ. Okay, so we've got that in. Now we need to determine the last results row. So I want to know the last results row of that. So we'll call it last invoice results row. So the last invoice result row is equal to what? We'll use column AA. AA is going to be the last one. Also, if there's no invoices that meet that criteria, we can skip that, but we don't need to continue. So if the last invoice result row is less than 3, then go to, let's just say, no invoices or something like that. So we can skip out. We don't need to continue on if there's no data. We can skip to the next result, then go to the next result. Okay, so we're going to go down here, right under here, next result. We're going to write next result and then add that colon in there. Okay, so continuing on, assuming that there is data, we can then determine, we're going to bring down those formulas, right? I want to bring down that sent or not sent formula with all the results. So how do we do that? Dot range AK3, that's where first through AK and last invoice result row dot formula is equal to dot range AK1, that's where our formula is located, dot formula. And that is the sent, not sent formula. So it's really powerful when you can combine formulas with these advanced filter results. You can do a lot of work with them. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to loop through these results. So for invoice result row is going to equal 3 to last invoice result row. Next, invoice result row. Okay, so we're going to loop through the results. So let's say here, loop through invoice results. And of course, we only want to send those when it's not sent. So we're simply looking for that. If dot range AK and the invoice result row dot value equals not sent. That's what we're looking for. Then continue on. So we're only sending those emails to those that have not been sent. We've already calculated that through the formula. So we can continue on. So these are the ones we're going to be sending those emails to. So first thing I want to do is I also want to make sure we extract some information. I want to know the balance of that invoice. So we're going to put that in a variable. Invoice balance is going to be equal to, but I also want to format that, right? I don't want just the number. That balance is located in AJ. I'm going to format that based on the $sign. So I'm going to format it. And where am I going to get it? That's going to come directly from AJ.range, AJ, and what is it? The invoice result row dot value. And what's the kind of format that I want to give it? That dollar format. So we're going to use that, the $sign here. And then I'll use the pound, and then I'll use dot. Let's use the common one, which is comma, and then pound, pound. You can get this in the formats if you want to. And then dot 00. Okay, I like that format. That should be sufficient. No, these should be pound signs, not dollar signs. Okay, that's going to be sufficient for us. So we got pound, comma, comma, pound, and then 0.00. That'll be sufficient for our format. That will be just fine. We'll use that same for all the number formats. That's called the balance amount. So we want to know the balance amount. What else are we going to need? I also want to know the invoice number. Invoice number. I have that in a variable. And where's that going to be located? That invoice number is going to come directly from, as we see here, column AA. So I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to change it to AA equals AA. So that is our invoice number because we may need to include that invoice number inside the email. So invoice number. What else do we need? Well, I would like to also know the customer name. That customer name we might need to include in the email. So I've got in a variable called customer name here in a string variable, and that's going to be based on AC there. So AC is our customer name. Changing this to AC, we may need that. So customer name. All right, continuing on, I also want to make sure I want to know the row. Why is that important? I want to know the customer email address. Now, I know the customer name, but I don't know the customer email address. Where is it located? It's located in another sheet. If we click on here, we see this is a list of our customers. Now, if I know the customer name, I'm going to determine the customer row based on that name. And I know that in column H is where that email is located. So let's extract that row by using basically a find command inside Excel. Once we find the row, and then I know that, assuming that we do have the results. So we can do that. So let's go ahead and pull that up here. And so I'm going to wrap it in on error resume next and on error go to 0. And that is because if it's not found, it could create a bug. So we're going to set the customer row simply equal to, I'm going to go into customers dot range, and I've got a named range already called customer underscore name. So that's the named range that's already created. Dot find, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the customer name. And I'm looking at Excel values and Excel whole. Okay. And what do I want to extract? I want to extract that row number. So I want that row. If it's found, then we can pull the email. So if the customer row does not equal 0, then what? Let's put 0. Then we can extract an email. Then I'm going to set another variable. What is that variable? We're just going to call it email2, call it customer email, equals customers.range, column H, and the customer row dot value. Else, we'll just set the customer email to 0. Customer email to nothing, equals nothing, or double quotes. Okay, that will set the customer, the set customer email. Okay, so we're basically going to look it up, we're going to find it, and we're going to extract the customer email because we're going to set that as our to email. So now that we know the customer email based on the column H, we can then move on to the penalty type. So the penalty type is what? Penalty, I really want to calculate the amount of the penalty. So if the penalty type is equal to percent, then we need to calculate based on a percent. So I want that percent, let's call it percent of balance. Okay, so if it equals that, then what are we going to do? Then the penalty amount we're going to calculate is simply equal to penalty times the invoice balance, right? It's a percentage, so all we're doing is multiplying the invoice amount. So times the invoice balance. That is the thing. Else, what else? It's amount else. Then the penalty amount is simply equal to the penalty. I'll just go over that in case you forgot it again, because it gets a little bit confusing. So basically, I want to set this penalty amount. I want to know the total penalty amount, but I've got to base it. So if it is a percentage, let's look back and say the admin here. If it's a percentage, let's say it's 3%, I need to multiply 3% times the balance and let them know that's the penalty. However, if it's a fixed amount, 50, then we're just simply going to make the penalty amount that $50. So we're basically calculating either 3% of the invoice balance or $50. That's going to set that penalty up automatically. Okay, so continue on. That's going to set the penalty amount. The only other thing I want to do with the penalty amount is I want to format it just like I did here. So I'm going to format it because it's going to be a value. So I'm just going to copy this here. Here we're going to say penalty amount is equal to format, also the penalty amount. This is simply going to format that amount, and then we're just going to, oops, 2 commas, we don't need that. Okay, so that format penalty amount, kind of clear. Okay, so continue on. Now that we format it, I also want to know the days overdue. How many days are they overdue? So if the due date, is 2 months, right? How many total days? So we're going to set the days overdue is equal to the date, the current date, minus the due date, right? So minus, where's that due date located? That due date is located directly inside column AF. AF is where it is. So I'm just going to copy this, and then we're going to change it to AF. Copy this is minus whatever is located in AF. So that's the due date. Determine days, days overdue. Okay, so once we have the number of days overdue, because we might put that in there, I also want to know the total due. What is the total due? Total due is equal to basically our penalty amount plus the invoice balance, right? Invoice balance, that's our total due. So we have that, but also, again, I want to format that. So just using the format, so we can copy this, paste it in there, and then copy this, and then paste it in there. Okay, so we're going to format the total due based on that $. So total due formatted. Okay, now that we know the total due, because all that could be inside the email. Now what we're doing is we've got all the variables set up. What I want to do is I want to replace. So I've got 2 different variables here for the email. I've got email subject, email message, and I've got subject and message. So we've already used subject and message, right? We've already determined the subject and message down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create brand new email and brand new messages, but these 2 variables are going to be based on all of the information. So basically, I want to add in those variables instead of, so what that means basically, when we create a payment, instead of customer name or instead of this invoice balance, I'm going to look for this. And instead of that, I'm going to put the actual balance. And then I'm going to create a brand new variable called email message on this or email subject on this. So we're simply going to replace those. So we can do that with a multi. Now, how many are there? So we see that there are 6 different variables that we can add in. So that means we need to create 6 different replace statements. So starting down here. So we're going to do replace. And then I'm just going to copy that 6 times. So we're using 6. Now, I've done loops where we loop through the variables, but in this case, we're going to use variables. But there's also, like if you have a lot, what you do is you put the value here, and then you loop through these, and you can replace through these. So that's probably an easier way of doing it. This time, we're not doing that because sometimes we have a lot. So we just simply loop through that. If this is found, you replace it with, so we'd have to put the variable here, but I didn't do that this time. Okay, so you can just see the difference. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1 more, 6. Okay, so what are we going to replace? Well, the first thing is we're going to replace that subject variable. And what am I going to replace it? So the first thing that I want to replace is the customer name. So we're going to look for customer name. So I'm going to look for brackets, customer name in the end bracket and the end quote. And then I want to replace it. What do I want to replace it with? The actual customer name. So the variable that we created here. Okay, so we're going to end quotes. Next up, what else do I want to replace? Oh, well, let's take a look down and we can go in order here as we bring this down. Invoice number, invoice balance. So again, quotation marks inside the brackets, invoice number. We want to make sure that we're matching those variables as we added them. And we're going to replace that with the actual invoice number. So comma, invoice number. Okay, and the parentheses, comma, and then the next one. Next one's going to be the invoice balance. So again, brackets, invoice balance here. It's the full balance here. Then in quotation, then we want a comma here, and we're going to place it with, you see, if we take a look, invoice balance, INV, our variable here, invoice balance. Okay, and parentheses, comma. Okay, next up, what do we want to have? We also want to have the penalty amount. So again, quotation marks here. It'll move over for you automatically. There it is, penalty amount. That's the variable that we're going to update, and we're going to update with the actual penalty amount. So that penalty amount in our variable here is located penalty amount. So this is our variable right here. That's what we're going to be changing it with. Okay, so you get the idea when we do it here. Okay, continuing on. What else? I want to make the days overdue. So again, adding that bracket, days overdue. This repetition actually helps you learn very, very well. We're going to replace it with the actual days overdue. So that days overdue, keeping your variables clear is a lot easier, especially when you're dealing with a lot of variables. Okay, and then we also have, let's take a look, our last one here is going to be total due. So putting in the quotation marks here, a bracket here, and then total due. Okay, this total due with the end bracket here, and then also in quotations, comma, and we also have the total due. So that's going to be our last variable, total due. Okay, and parentheses. Okay, now take a look at that. All this is simply going to be our brand new email. So email subject, okay, equals that. Okay, so now all I'm going to do is simply copy this, and then we're going to update the message too. So here, email message is our other variable, and then I'm just going to change this out to message. So now what we've done is we replaced both the subject and the message with that information, saving our work. We've done a lot of work on this. Now continuing on. So now we're pretty much ready to set that email. So we've created our customized email subject, our customized email message. We're going to set that Outlook mail. We're ready to set the Outlook mail. We've just created the Outlook so far. Is going to be equal to the Outlook application. What type of Outlook application? We're going to create an item. That's going to create that email. And that 0 is going to create that brand new email. We can focus on that email with the Outlook mail. Where's that to address? That .to is going to be equal to the customer email. Okay, next up, we also want to set, that's kind of obvious, to email. And then we also want to do the subject. What is that subject? Going to be equal to that email subject, That's the one that contains our variables. The body is going to be equal to the email message. And then also we want to either send it or display it. So we'll do .display. And I'll put a note in here, .use .send to send without displaying. Okay, this is a big macro. I'm sure there's a few issues that we have to work out, but that's no problem. We can walk through each bug together and fix them. That much programming, there's going to be some bugs. Always saving our work before running anything here. We want to make sure that we're going to add that macro to this. So I'm going to hold down the control. There's one more thing I actually have to do in that macro. And I want to determine how many emails were sent, but I can assign the macro now. Assigning the macro, and that's going to be payments, check, and send. That's what we're going to do. Okay, so continuing on inside this macro, I just also want to know how many we're going to add, and we also have to add it to the reminder log. But let's just check to see if there's any issues before we move on with the code, because we need to add it to the code. So we're going to click here, see if there's any due days. Let's fix that. That's a misspelling on that. And then continue on here. And then this particular one should be CDBL. So we'll update that. Okay, continuing on, running our macro. Okay, penalty amount, this variable, gotta update that spelling. Okay, that looks good, penalty amount, continuing on. Okay, so there's no more errors in this. We've got that set up and the email got created. Those are looking good. We need to fix the to email because that's gotta get set up to the right person. So everything else looks good. Let's update that to make sure that it does get found, and we'll check the variables as well, because invoice number doesn't look correct. Okay, I see the issue here. We need to make sure that it's dot range for dot, right? We want to make sure that we add it because that's based on the invoice list with the invoice list. So we want to make sure in front of every range that we do have a dot. That's probably why the email was not found. And we want to make sure, I'm just going to check here to make sure that all of our code, saving our work, again, running this code again. Let's take a quick look. It's going to create those emails. We haven't yet added it to the log yet. The customer name is now found. Good. I see that the invoice number, that looks good, $50. This looks O2. This will fix that up here. This looks a little bit incorrect. Let's check the other emails. Yeah, we're going to fix that. The total owed to due date, and we'll fix that. Okay, let's take a look inside the code. What I'll do is I'll put a stop on the code right about here. Run that code here. Let's take a look at the variable here. And we see now that the total overdue penalty amount, $10. Total due, yeah, that's not right. It's adding, look, 10 plus 974. So it's treating this as a string and this as a string. We need double, not string. So we're going to update that. Penalty amount, we should be double. It's an amount, double, even though we're going to format it as a string. Double, and an email is a string. So that is sufficient there. So I'm going to reset that. Click OK, it'll reset that. Undo that, we don't need that. I'm going to reset that. Actually, we can add that in right here. Just again, run the code, make sure that it's calculated properly. Running that, total due, 984. Okay, I like that. That looks much better, although we need to format that and make sure that it's formatting correctly this time. Continuing on with the code. Okay, there we go. That looks good. We just need to format it. I need to make sure that that gets formatted. Now the total due string was variable, so we'll update that format, but everything else looks really good. All right, then we just need to add it to the log. So let's go ahead and continue and fix that. Okay, back inside the code, I'm just going to reset that total due, right? Since it's not inside any calculations, we can set that to a string. This can be a string, but penalty amount and penalty, those need to be a double because they're used in formulas. Total due is not used, so I'm going to set that to a string. That'll be sufficient. Okay, we'll go ahead and just to make sure, take a quick look, putting that stop right here, and then running the code here, taking a look at the penalty amount, that total due to see now it is properly formatted. If we run that code again, those emails will get created, and we now see here that it's properly formatted. Very good, I like that. Now all we need to do is simply add these to the log. So there's two logs that I'm going to be adding them to. The first log is our reminder log. I want to make sure that the reminder log gets sent here. The second, if there was a penalty, I want to make sure that the penalty gets added. I want the penalty on a separate log because this way we can actually total. If we create a customer statement, we can then add in these late payment penalties along with the invoice list. So the late payments, the penalties and the invoices get added up together. So that's why we want to create a penalty log independent from the reminder log, only if there was a penalty associated. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that reminder log. Inside this log, I want to check the first available row and I want to add in all of the details here. So we're going to continue on with our code. So that's it for the invoice. So once we're finished with sending the email out, we're going to then focus on that log. So I'm going to put add here, a little note, add to a reminder log. Okay, we need to get that log row. What is that log row? It's going to be based on that, first of all, reminder. We got reminder log. This is the sheet that's located here. Dot range, A, and then 99, we'll use long row, dot end, XLF, dot row plus 1, the first available row. Okay, so inside that row, then I want to set what's going to go in A, reminder log, dot range, A, I want to put that sent date, and the log row, dot value is going to equal the date. So we'll use the current date equals date, current date. What do I want in B? In column B, we're going to put that customer. So I'm going to copy this, paste 1 for B. This is going to equal the customer name. I want that customer name to go in there. Okay, that's going to go into column B. Inside column C, I want to put that reminder ID. This is why variables are so helpful. C is going to take on that reminder ID. C equals reminder ID. Use lowercase. If it changes to uppercase, you know you've got the variable right. Reminder ID. Continuing on inside column D, I want to then place the reminder. What reminder did we use? That's going to take on that variable number, and we're going to call that the penalty name inside column D. Equals the penalty name. So reminder, okay, that's going to be the name of the reminder. Reminder. Okay, next up is the penalty name. So that's going to be in column E. That is the penalty. Equals penalty NM. Penalty name. And then I want to put that invoice number in column F. That is the invoice number. It's going to track that. That's very important. So we know that we don't send out duplicates. Invoice number here invoice number. Okay, next up inside column G is going to be that subject, and that's going to be the email subject. So we're going to equals email subject, and that's kind of self-explanatory. Next up, we also want to put inside H, lastly, is going to be that email message, equals email message. So we know exactly what was sent. That's, of course, that's the actual details of what was sent, okay, not the template part. Okay, so we have the email, lastly in column H. So also what I want to do inside this here, I want to make sure again that we're wrapping the text. So range, the log row, and also the log row dot wrap text equals false. That's so it doesn't expand those rows. So we don't want to do that. Okay, very, very good. That's going to add it to the log, but now what I want to do is I want to add it to the penalty log, but only if there's a penalty amount. So we're going to check if the penalty amount does not equal 0, then we're going to add it to the log. Let's put in 0. 0, then we're going to add it to the log, okay? And if, okay, so here's where we're going to add it to the log. I'm just going to put in a little note, add to penalty log. So again, all we want to do is determine the row. Penalty row is going to be equal to, again, penalty log, that's the log range, same as we did before, A999.end, XLUp, dot row plus 1. That's the first available row. Okay, once we have the penalty row, we can start adding data in penalty row. And we're going to switch to that penalty sheet so we can take a look inside this penalty. Oh, here it is here. Penalty date, the number, the customer name, and amount in those columns respectively. So we can add that in. So penalty log column A, here in the penalty row, we're going to first add in the date. So A and the penalty row dot value equals date, set current date. Okay, very good. So I'm just going to copy this here. I'm going to use one for B. What's going to be is going to take on that invoice number. So equals invoice number, set invoice number. C, we want to put in that customer name, equals customer name, set customer name. Also inside D, you're going to put the penalty name. What was the name of the penalty that went in there? We already know that. That is going to be the penalty name equals penalty name. Okay, very good. And also in lastly column E, we're going to put the penalty amount. So it's going to be equal penalty amount. And also before that, I just want to make sure that we're keeping track of it. I've got a variable called reminder count, REM count. It's right up here. It's a variable here, a long variable, REM count. I want to keep track of all the reminders that were created, and I'm going to let the user know how many reminders got created. So to do that, we can set reminder count equals reminder count plus 1. Increment reminder count. And the reason we're going to do that is because lastly, we're going to simply put a message box, how many reminders were created, reminder count, and space reminders were sent, okay? Okay, so I like that, sent. Okay, let's save that. Always save it. Everything looks good. We can check for errors. Again, go back into the payment reminders, check and send. Let's fix that. Log row. No, let's change that to log. Go ahead, continue on. Okay, let's take a look. Emails are getting created. Hello, James. Our records show that you have balance of invoice 6 for $974. Amount of, this should be formatted. Amount of 50 has been assessed. Total 64 days. Okay, that looks good. Other than this formatting, everything looks really good. And we see now 3 reminders have been sent. Okay, so everything looks good. Let's go ahead and format that, and that'll be good. And we'll just add the same format that we have here as everywhere else. So let's take a look inside the code. I'm just going to copy this. This is the format. And we need to add that to our penalty. So which is right here is our penalty. And it's going to equal format. Okay, so we want to put that in there to make sure that we put the penalty into the penalty amount, because that's the amount that we're using, and that's the amount that went in here. So penalty amount, format that. All right, into the code. I just made a quick update. All I really want to do is penalty amount can be a string. In this case, penalty double, as long as one of them are amounts. Let's take a look at this. Check and send. Create one more email. Okay, 60 days, right? We have the invoice number 6 for $50. Amount owed, 64 days overdue. Everything looks really nice with this. That's working good. Let's double check the reminder log. In this training, we added on to already an incredible invoice application complete with payments. And now we're adding on payment reminders. We created this screen from scratch along with the ability conditional formatting based on the selected payment, loading that payment information, automating the number of days, extracting things from the database so that we can assign penalties based on either a fixed amount or percentage on the balance due. We're able to add new, save reminders using data mapping very, very quickly, having a host of variables that we can add inside these customized emails. Then we're going to be able to add in check and send reminders with a single macro that checks and automatically adds and sends information to the customer and then keeps track of a log through both the reminder log and the penalty log. It's been an incredible training. Thank you so much. If you want to support this channel, so many ways to do that. I've got a brand new course which you will absolutely love, specifically for freelancers, to help you get started as a freelancer and start earning passive incomes regardless of the trade that you're doing. I've got a proven 9-phase method that has helped me become one of the top freelancers, and I want to help you as well. So I created this course for you to give you all the successful habits that you can as a successful freelancer. I want to see you reach that. So I've got a course. I'll include the links down below. Thank you very much for your continued support, and we'll see you next week. We're now back on weekly. Also check our brand new shorts, small tidbits of really cool tips, just 1 minute long, and we'll be releasing those on Saturday. All right, thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.